Hello there, it is a Tuesday, which means it's time for another in real life video, and this week we are talking about something that not a whole bunch of people, but a fair number of people have been talking about, at least in this space, doing what I do here for a living. It's something that I've been acutely aware of, and it's been on my mind for some time. I've talked about it in the past, and that is generative AI being used to, I don't know, replace people working, right? And specifically in this case, of course, being used to replace someone doing this, right? Someone talking into a camera behind their computer monitor and all of that, right? Specifically someone playing a video game and doing that, which is what I do, and many others, of course. So this is specifically about the more recent update to, I believe it's Google's VO3, which is not the letters V and O, but VEO3. But it has recently been updated and come out and all of that. I believe it's one of the ones that you have to pay some exorbitant amount of money to use beyond like any type of trial period or whatever. But someone put out an example of what it's capable of, among other things. Like, I'm sure a lot of folks, whether you want to or not, you have had to see AI generated video of people talking about, well, what's prompt theory, right? Prompt theory? We're not all prompts or whatever, stuff like that. Sort of self-referential AI meta jokes and commentary and all of that. It's been making the rounds, and it looks, as is always the case, every time there's a new iteration of this, it looks impressive, it looks believable, it becomes more and more difficult to sort of tell apart the difference, right? And we're starting to see, like, the case here with, like, I don't know, this streamer sort of let's play situation, right? In lieu of describing it, I've captured video from the exact thing that I'm talking about, and let's see if I can get to actually play here properly, right? So without further ado, bear witness to this if you have not already yet borne witness to it. Our host on this amazing, like, 8-second journey snippet is the visage of a man who I can only describe as the 1 out of 10 rating system that Game Informer used to use. Or was it Game Pro? Perhaps it was Game Pro. But you know what I'm talking about? They had 1 out of 10, and they had a little face of a guy who started freaking out more and more the closer you got to that illustrious 10. This human being looks like that little guy. It's a wild choice to make him look like this, but it is kind of funny, right? True enough, it is kind of funny how, like, absolutely 1990s video game magazine this dude looks. But mind you, this is not a real dude. Let's roll the tape, as it were. Let's roll the VLC video source here. Let me see about this.
Okay, so this is how you start. You find a tree, and you just, like, you know, punch it down. Okay, so this is how you start.
Absolutely,
you find a tree.
Going buck wild. But I think the main question on the main thing that a lot of folks are worried about is this going to replace a lot of people? And I would say just right off the bat, I don't think so. I think less it will replace people and more it will phase some people out. I think one of the major detriments in this space is how difficult it is for anyone to sort of get a foothold. It's so difficult to get started and sort of begin to carry on within this space in any meaningful way. Like I've said in the past, there's no shortage of instances where luck is just incredibly important, right? You need some measure of luck in addition to, like, talent or skill or craft or whatever, right? There is an undeniable luck factor. But in this case, I don't think I think that this sort of AI generative video situation, the big flaw of it is that it's not going to take away really from anyone who is currently doing it and is in some way established, right? Your benefit is going to be like, the more established you are, the less of an impact this is going to have on you, right? As has existed for years now, living human people have a difficult time getting people to pull their eyes and their time away from those who are already established, much less someone who is not even a real person, regardless of whether you could or could not tell that in the future, right? I think it's maybe coming at from the wrong angle to be like, this doesn't look like a real person. This is not like the mannerisms of a real person, or whatever, because in due time, barring catastrophe, in due time, that can be fixed, right? The sort of realism or lack thereof can be mended. Saying that it looks ridiculous and all of that, it's funny, it's right, it's a fun joke and all of that, but it holds no water in the long run, because whatever the issues may be, it certainly feels like in due time, it will be corrected. You know, as we iterate more on the process. Like, for instance, on this person seems like a caricature of a human being, as is still currently the case, but like I've said before, it's becoming more and more difficult. Details. If you have specific niche details or niche interests, you can hone in on details that will give away the fact that these things are not reality, right? For instance, the first thing that I sort of notice is right here, the Ralph Lauren pony on this person's shirt. That don't look anything like it, right? That don't look anything like it. Immediately, there's details in the clothes you can pick out and sort of tell. But true enough, it's becoming a lot better at it. I remember there was that big kerfuffle recently when Marvel put out not like a video, not like an actual trailer, but it was like teaser stills and images from that were meant to promote the new Fantastic Four movie or whatever. And a lot of them were very obviously AI, and you could tell by zooming up and you could see, you know, the usual suspects of that time, that being like hands, fingers, and whatnot. But so too were there issues with the clothing, right? I remember talking a little bit about how the clothing was inaccurate, wouldn't make any sense. There were like people who you would expect to be wearing feminine clothing with the buttons on the wrong side or whatever. It didn't make any sense. Stuff like that. Pattern matching gone horribly awry when it should be there. It's details like that we can still sort of notice and use to tell, like, okay, this is definitely like generative AI at work. The same is true here. If you maybe aren't into clothes or whatever, you could probably also tell very easily in this. I've seen a few people point this one out. And if you're very familiar with Minecraft, for instance, let's see here. We can go back a little bit in this video, and you can see that they currently have, right here, I'm pointing with my mouse cursor, let me use my real hand. They have their pickaxe equipped, but they are using their hand, right? You'll see as the video shifts and goes on, right there, they pick up bread when they are clearly not picking up bread, you know? There's details like that which just simply don't make sense. The trees in the background and all that sort of shift in weird ways as they break stuff. It's close, but it's not quite there, right? It's close, but not quite there. And like I said, eventually, I'm guessing stuff like this, we're not going to be able to rely on quite as much, right? As the years come and go, it will get more and more difficult to discern. But I think the best piece of advice that I heard is that if you do wish to sort of like, I don't know, denounce, sort of argue, counter it, you need to come from a more like holistic angle and sort of discuss it insofar as like the moral implications and all of that of it, sort of the ethics, the loss of like human spirit, as it were. But all in all, in this case specifically, I think generating like AI generated YouTubers are really only going to take away from and make it harder to get into the space, right? Off the because of it being like a sheer numbers game. You know, you'll have a situation where, right, maybe you want to try your hand at it. Like I've said on this very channel, the best way to go about it is to start it as like a hobby. You start it as a hobby, you try and get into it and all that. But there's other people who are not even actual people, but are instead AI prompts and all of that, that are doing as well. Thus, you know, increasing the barrier to entry that much more, right? But granted, on the flip side, you could make an argument that like, oh, well, this person who is doing it in this way, through AI prompts, it is their job to do the prompts. You know, this has become their job. They're a prompt writer. That's their job now, right? If you're just watching or listening to a video just to have some like background noise as you're like washing the dishes or folding laundry or whatever, perhaps it doesn't matter so much to you that it be a real person. Or what's more likely, perhaps you don't notice, right? And I don't want to just so quickly say like younger people will be the most susceptible to that, because just go on Facebook and you will see no shortage of older people falling for a very obvious AI generated video, right? And imagery, you know, it's not sort of centrally located within any age range. I think there's susceptibility to be found everywhere. But like I said, I think at the forefront of my mind is it's hard enough to get people to stop watching who they're already sort of taken by, you know? It's hard enough to do that I don't think AI generated, I don't know, influencers or whatever is going to really have much of an impact in that end of things. It's at the entry level, right? I don't know, as is often the case, it's people trying to make their way and get started, get their foot in the door that are going to have issues. I would say that this is going to really hurt them. But, of course, the other point of contention is what I brought up here is that, the game itself is AI generated, right? The game itself, as seen here, like we had shown with the ways in which, right, you start with a certain amount of bread. For some reason, it just pops up to 7. You know, you pop up to 7 bread when you're like chopping down a tree or whatever. That I think could be grounds for some really wild and interesting litigation in the near future, right? Like I said, as this sort of begins building up, I think you could run into issues where people who, like development studios who make games, or even for instance, the musicians that they contract out and all of that. Here, let me move this lunatic off of here. But I think there would be a space in the near future for instance, like I said, a studio that either produces, develops video games, or like I said, is someone who is contracted out a bit more of a third party, someone who makes music. If you generate some sort of video or whatever that displays it in a certain way that looks as if, you know, for instance, this looks a lot like Minecraft, but it plays very differently from it, or distinctly enough. It sounds distinctly enough different. Are you leading someone on? In that case, is there room for sort of, I don't know, copyright holders, the original creative, to step in and do something? And similarly, in this way, is there room for this to be like exploited, right? One of the things that I can't help but think of is, what if you portray the game to work poorly and it's not true? One of the things I can't help but think of here, like I've been saying, is Oblivion videos, right? There's no shortage of Oblivion videos where something silly happens in the game, right? There's plenty of people who sort of make a living off of this, right? Or at least have made a pretty decent chunk of change. And their experience in the game is not actually indicative. What they're showcasing in the video is not actually indicative of regular gameplay. Not even insofar as this is a weird bug that cropped up. No, in some cases, and I'm sure a lot of folks who watch this channel are acutely aware of this as well, in some cases, you tweak with the game files a little bit, right? You tweak with a mod, right? You get physics to behave differently. We've all seen videos and stuff, I would assume, wherein someone's playing Oblivion, a guard shows up and starts just flying off, but their whole skeleton, their character rigging just starts wiggling in some ridiculous sense, right? Whoever has messed around with the game files has, of course, changed around the physics, changed around the way in which gravity applies to everyone. And they're doing it to comedic effect. At this point in time, I think a lot of people understand, like, well, you know what? I would say most people understand that this is someone tampering around with the game files for the sake of comedy. What happens when enough people start to think, well, this game is just a buggy mess, right? This game is just a mess. It's always like this. I've never played this game in my life, and I won't ever be, because it looks like this. In this case, specifically with Oblivion, I don't think it's a big issue. It's an older game. People have experience with it and all of that. What I think could be more insidious is if you generate something a little bit more clandestine, I guess, more covert. You say, oh, it doesn't need to be an easy to reproduce bug. What if I generate something to where, for whatever reason, I don't like this new game that just came out? Mind you, this is a very specific example, right? But you could extrapolate it further outward. I don't like this new game that came out, right? It's woke or whatever, right? I don't like the development team. I don't like them. They're woke. It's pushing an agenda or whatever. Generate something in AI. Oh, my goodness. I bought up the most recent release within my favorite game franchise or whatever, and I loaded it onto my computer, and would you look at that? It bricked the darn thing. It bricked my computer. Isn't this a damn shame? It probably won't happen to most people that it bricks their entire computer, but there's a risk it might happen to you. And for some folks, that's enough to say, well, I'm not gonna risk it, right? And fair enough, how can I blame anybody who makes that decision off of that information? But what if that information is completely fabricated, right? I think that would be the most insidious way to go about it, is to make it to where it's not something that you need to or would want to reproduce in that way. You just fake it as if, well, there's a weird issue that the game is causing for some people. And that's enough, I would think, to get some folks to say, well, I'm just not going to take the risk. I was somewhat interested in this game, but the interest was enough to perhaps buy it, maybe on sale or whatever, some sort of discount. But the price to pay if this goes wrong with my build, with my console, my setup or whatever, it's too high. Thus, I'll turn my gaze elsewhere. You could see all sorts of examples of this, I think, kind of spinning out of control. And I have to say, I have to wonder, at what point is this going to have an impact on people who are doing it for comedy's sake, right? Like I said, there's no shortage of people who mess around with, for instance, Oblivion's game files, What if Microsoft down the line is like, actually, we don't like you sort of making our game look more bugged out than is actually true, Not even in the case of Microsoft. It could be anything, It could be, they're even more susceptible is like an indie game, right? Wherein you don't really have any sort of form of litigious behavior whatsoever that you can undertake to sort of defend yourself or get other people in sort of boiling water, as it were. I think there's a whole realm of problems that have yet to be opened up and explored when concerning how this messes with, I guess I would say product that's currently available and currently for sale. You know, already right now we see AI being sort of raked through the coals for using and sort of sourcing a lot of its generative, what would you call it? The basis for which it generates imagery and video from old copyright stuff, you know? That's currently going through the courts. Someone, I forgot who it even was. I don't pay that much attention to it, but someone even said like, well, if our generative AI isn't allowed to parse and source information from copyright material, then it's as good as dead, right? That was very recently making the news again. And this, I think, is just yet another derivative of it that we haven't quite gotten to, but I think we have the potential for. And like I said, when it comes to bigger projects like video games, bigger collaborative projects, I think you do run the risk of more parties being involved and having an issue with it being displayed in that way, right? I think music is a really big one, wherein a video game studio might contract a musician to play a song for their game or whatever, and then someone, a fan or a hater, I guess, like an anti-fan, decides, oh, I'm going to put out a generative AI video that makes this game seem like dog shit, right? And it's going to, in some way, make music that sounds like that musicians' work, but isn't quite, and actively tries to portray it in a poor light. At what point, how long down the road do you get to where, oh shoot, the agency that this musician operates under, they're going to press charges. All of this stuff gets locked down massively because of it. I feel like we are approaching a sort of cliff face when it comes to this, where there's the possibility not for it to both become even more of a Wild West than it currently is, even more of a situation where less and less people can tell what's real and what isn't if it's not in front of their very eyes. And you sort of have distrust of anyone new who you think is not proven, you know? Similarly, there's the opposite situation where all of this stuff gets locked down and it has an impact on things that came before it because of certain court rulings or whatever, right? Wherein, oh, yeah, you can't use AI to like make our game, make my music or whatever appear in a certain way that isn't truthful. That seems like a very honest thing to ask, I would say. But you could also have that ruling apply even further back. Oh, I don't want you making my game look more buggy than it truly is. And then you have to run through this really wild instance of litigation where it's like, well, how buggy is your game originally, right? Is this a bug that's reproducible? And I don't know. I don't know how wild this could spin out, but the opportunity is certainly there. And I think more so that is what to worry about. It is stuff like that in both directions. And as well, like I said, when it comes to like making videos on the internet or streams or whatever, I think it's way more likely to hurt people trying to get their foot in the front door. Which, of course, is a big reason why I decided to do face cams and stuff, and am progressively making more and more videos involving face cam. I've had a few folks decry like, oh gosh, I actually really quite liked there being no face cam. Or, but that's they're in the far minority. A lot more people like, I love it. Oh my God, I love it. I absolutely love it. But make no mistake, as I mentioned in the past, a big reason for me deciding to do that is to sort of hopefully, in some minor way, separate myself from the coming avalanche of generative AI, right? That will happen. That will come. I have no doubt about it. We already see it in some ways. If you pay attention to the VTuber space, well, you'll know that they have a bit of a Nazi problem, right? But unrelated to that, there is also like a bunch of AI VTubers, right? It's more difficult to become a VTuber these days because you can just generate your own, you know? You can generate your own in some way. And just as well, that tech will keep getting advanced by people who potentially do work in this same space. People who are like established and very popular creators or influencers or whatever. Maybe you need it as some form of accessibility that you decide to incorporate AI, but that nonetheless puts money into that space, right? Maybe you want your videos or whatever to be more accessible. Thus, you create generated translations into a different language or whatever. You know, maybe you want you create a different version of yourself to appear or whatever, right? Which would be really wild, you know? True enough, there could be someone making a video who puts out, you know, I look like a 1990s gaming magazine caricature of a human being, but I don't actually. In reality, that ain't me. I don't look anything like, let's see, this guy. Right? But I don't know. What all is possible within this incredible world now, I guess. But yeah, these are my real concerns. I'm not too concerned for myself. Like I said, I think it's generally difficult to get people to check out things beyond their own purview, you know? I think that's way more uncommon. And like I said, when it comes to proving out like, oh, you are a real person or whatever, it's if you've already got your foot in the door, it's a lot easier than if you're up and coming, right? I think the real issue will have to wait to see like a decade plus from now. How much harder will it be for someone to get into that space? You know, how much more difficult is that going to become? That's the real point of contention for me. I just thought that this week I would sort of share my thoughts on it because it's true enough. This is a bit more of a self-serving IRL video, but sometimes we do a little self-serve, right? Anyway, as per usual, if you would like, feel free to submit questions and topics for future IRL videos if you would like. They get added to a immense and growing, but also shrinking list. Helps if you include a question mark, and as always, I can't cover it if it would break like terms of service or if it's too personal or whatever about my own self and being. Anyway, that ought to do it for this week. Until next time, please take care of each other.